Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our top producer panel. We welcome Bruce Myer and Julie Berger. But first, before we get started with this wonderful hour, we're going to get started with our sponsor, Julie from Puro Clean. Would you like to come up and tell us a little bit about your business?
Okay, now I can see everybody. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Julia Jones with Pure Clean. It's Pure Clean at Bradenton. I am the owner and got a few notes here, but I'm very happy to be sponsoring this panel here today. So Pure Clean, we are known as the paramedics of property damage. And basically, your worst nightmare is our everyday. So we work with property damage that relates to like water, which could be anywhere from the storms, the flood coming in, or a toilet backup. And for fire, we deal with cigarette smoke odor. We deal with remediation after fires. Mold, we are remediators. And for biohazard, if you have a home that needs to be refreshed, maybe after an illness, or maybe somebody wants to move into it, just know it's clean. That's something that we're able to do. Also, we do help with the trauma, like after, clean up after trauma, if you happen to run across a home that has that. A lot of people don't even know that's something that is offered. That is a service that we do. So basically, our value to you is to help you get your home sold. So if you find something, you get a listing, it smells, there's issues with it, we will be the remediators that you would call to help you with those issues. So we are certified, licensed, the whole deal, the whole spiel, and we service Sarasota and Manatee County. And I am in BNI, so if you are in BNI network and want to have referral, I'm also in that network. And our phone number, 941-877-2288. And I also have a bunch of goodies in the back, and I have a drawing for, I thought because it's waterfront homes, you want to have a chair that floats in the pool. So that's going to be our drawing prize today. So put it in the little bag back there. It's just Pure Clean with the phone number on it too. And a lot of information and brochures and stuff back there. So enjoy your presentation, and I look forward to hopefully hearing from you and seeing how we can help.
Now it's serious.
Thank you, Julie. And please, everybody, that is in person, take a visit to Julie's table throughout the session. But first, we're going to get started, and we're going to bring up our moderator, Annette Bentley Riley.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see your guys' faces, and we're not all on Zoom. I love this. This is like my passion. I love to help realtors, and it's just something that I love to do in education. I want to just take some time out to say thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Bruce, for coming here. I know that you guys are very busy in this market, and I know it was a travel to get here, and we really do appreciate you taking the time out to give back to us as realtors. So thank you. So we're going to start with just introducing yourself, how long you've been into the business, how did you get there? And we'll start with Bruce.
You don't want to start with you?
Been around longer.
I know. Yeah. I guess I had a very fortunate beginning. I think a lot of us that are here now maybe have come to Florida because of family or friends or parents or whatever. So grew up in the Midwest in central Indiana in farm country, and my grandparents had purchased a condominium on Longboat Key. Do you know where Longboat is? I do. Okay. And so because of that, in 1970, and because of that, I had come down as a kid, believe it or not, as a kid then, and had vacationed. And then after getting out of college, went to a little school in Indiana. So I moved here with my Techniques turntable, my Bose 901s, and the little U-Haul, and found an apartment, and then ended up kind of through sports, really. I played golf as a kid, and my mom, who was a member of the tennis club on Longboat, was playing tennis. So I went over there with a vengeance. I'm 21 years old and just playing all the time. And a guy, John Woods, who was the tennis director, hired me. So I'm up at 5 a.m. going to sweep the courts, and then, working in the pro shop, and then drinking and playing tennis the rest of the day, until I met the guy, Chip Anderson. How one guy can change your life. Chip was the marketing and sales director for Arvida. And Arvida at one point was the largest landowner in the state of Florida. And they were the ones that did Bird Key and then a lot on Longbow Key. So he said one day, so, well, why don't you go get your real estate license? I go, okay, whatever that means. So from that point, and this is where it was a fortunate beginning. So I'm this little guy coming in, and I remember I'd taken an aptitude test in college and said, more setup for sales than anything. So I go, okay. So now I'm looking at the staff of 8, and Maggie, who's a good friend, has been around a long time. They're all different personalities. I mean, you had Gene Roach, who was just afraid of everybody. Snow Evans was a great guy. Pat Davey was a used car salesman. So I kind of thought, this is for a lot of different people. So anyway, I was able to have new product sales right from the very beginning. So rather than going out and doing what we're doing now, they brought in people. So we sold L'Ambiance and Sanctuary and about anything new starting from 1980. So that became a segment, which is what has allowed me to, for the last 42 years, really being probably 90% on Longbow Key, a little bit on St. Armand's, Siestas, Judie's, that's all hers. So anyway, it was just a great beginning that I was able to kind of get to know from the ground up many of the places on Longbow Key.
Wow, that sounds like a really great opportunity
great
that you
opportunity.
had. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So Judie, tell us a little bit about how you got into the business. And
My route was different, very different. I am from Southern New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. So when you say New Jersey, it's not New York. It's we for the Phillies and the Flyers and of course the Eagles. I was a designer for 25 years. I started the company with my ex-husband, who I'm still very good friends with. And what we did was we designed and manufactured thoroughbred racing apparel. So everything you see in horse racing, the Kentucky Derby, the Breeders' Cup, all over the world, we designed and manufactured racing apparel. And my oldest daughter still runs the company. So I was divorced, decided my new husband wanted to live in Florida. I thought it was vacationing in Florida, but he meant no, he wanted to live in Florida, and we had just built a home. And we vacationed here, and first it was for a week, and then it was for 2 weeks, and then the next year it was a month, and then the whole winter. And I thought, wow, this is just great, until he told me that he put our house up for sale up in New Jersey. So I reluctantly came. I'm born and raised in that area. I'm one of 6 kids. Everyone lived within 15 minutes of each other. I figured the home we had just built, my grandchildren would come to that home. So it was a tough move for me. And I knew no one. I didn't have any relative or friend here. So it was truly starting over. And so with my design background, I decided to take off, sold the company to my ex-husband, and decided to take off for 2 years. And then my 2 younger children were 4 and 5.5. So schools were a real big factor. And I am a proponent of public school. So, but everyone said, oh, there are certain schools you don't want to send your kids to. And that's to me like a challenge. So everyone told me that, well, this was before school choice. You could send your kids to this school, but you just have to give a different address. And that really didn't sit right with me. So what I did was start a full-time volunteer in the school that my kids were supposed to go to, the district school. I just I couldn't teach my children not to tell the truth. This is where we live, but you can't tell anyone where we live, so you can go to the school. So we ended up, at the time it was Philippi Shores. It was the school no one wanted to go to. And we started a friend of mine and we started the gifted program at Philippi Shores. She was president of the PTA and PTO, and I was vice president. I started the fundraisers there. They said that no one would do fundraisers at a school like that. And we had these big elegant events over at the Philippi Mansion. we really turned the school around. So after 2 years of fundraising, and then one of my kids went on to Pine View, and I got involved there, same thing, fundraising and the PVA. And my husband said, whoa, if you're spending this much time fundraising, you can get a job. Okay, my money was running out from selling my company. And I took on another big fundraiser, and he said, look, by the end of the week, you've got to figure out what you need to do. By the way, we are not married anymore. So, by the end of
How many are we up to?
two, just two. Just right sure out. So, at the end of that week, he wanted an answer. He was a very successful businessman. He said, you have to have a plan and you've got to figure out what you're going to do. I think he thought I was going to get a job at Dillard's or something. And my next door neighbor was Marcia McLaughlin. I don't know.
Oh,
Marcia.
yeah.
And Marcia used to have me drop paperwork off for closings and pick up keys and open up houses. Just, I thought it was great. So when he challenged me on Friday and he asked what I was going to do, I said, oh, I'm going to get a real estate license. And that was that. And I went to real estate school shortly after that. No help from him at all. And ended up going to RE/MAX because Marcia was there. And it's kind of the beginning of it. So my design background, I dealt with people that had very little money, horse trainers that owned 1 or 2 horses, and I dealt with princes from Abu Dhabi, the open racetracks. So I had the experience of dealing with people on a very high end as well. So, across the gamut of financial, what's important to people. But what I did come from a background where you work really hard for what you had. So it didn't matter if it was at the time, there were $100,000 homes south, east of the trail. You could buy homes for less than $100,000. And those were the castles to those people, as well as the multi-million-dollar homes, which then the 8 millions were $1 million. And they were castles to those people. So that's how I got started in real estate.
Wow.
And I had a really bad experience buying my home here. And I thought, wow, after I sat in real estate school, every person that ever buys a house should sit in real estate school because there's way too much to know waterfront property and different rules from where you came from. So I really got into real estate as a consumer advocate, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long have you been doing this now?
I am in my 23rd year.
Wow. So combined, you guys have been over 63 years of experience.
Oh, that's all.
That's incredible.
Not twice as much almost. You want to say who represented you in your bad experience?
No,
Yeah.
they're still around.
They're still around. Well, we want to thank you for coming. So the ones that are on Zoom, I want you guys to know that we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So please hold your questions, write them down. We're going to have about a 20-minute session at the end. But this is all about, if you guys have questions, please raise your hand. This is what this is about helping you understand. We're specifically talking about waterfront properties and how they got there and what issues can come about doing waterfront properties. So we're going to just dive right in. So what do you enjoy most about working with a buyer? What do you find in the luxury market that's challenging? And what do you like about the buyer of a luxury home?
Judy to go, or-
Judy, you go first.
Because we're talking about a luxury end, I think what I enjoy probably more than anything is just the people. They can be challenging because they're successful and they're used to being the boss. But I do find that this area in general, people come here because they can live anywhere and they choose to come here. And we just have this influx of our tapestry that is woven here with the types of people that come, where they come from, what they've done in their lifetimes, what they've been successful at. And in some cases, some of them have started second careers once they arrive. So I would say the people, meeting the people.
And what challenges have you found and is there a certain way that you have to handle them? Because it is a different market versus just, the $500,000 range.
You need to be experienced. I would say that selling waterfront property especially is not for inexperienced people. You can get into a lot of trouble and you can get your clients into a lot of trouble, especially, well, on both sides, as buyers and as sellers. Do your homework, go to every class that you can go to, search out the attorneys that specialize in waterfront, Steve, I will say that, and Steve laughs and says this, but Steve Greenberg, I would say, taught me just about everything I know about contracts and how you can get into trouble and how you can stay out of trouble. But truly, I attended every single session that he had from the time he started teaching.
Which has been 30 plus years.
I pulled my paperwork out years later from the first house we bought here, and my ex-husband had handled the transaction because we lived in New Jersey, but Steve had done the closing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is
All
awesome.
these years later, I pulled out the paperwork.
That is
But
great.
yes, get yourself educated because you want your client at the end to love you and you want to have a relationship with them later. And what I find is you could do everything right and you get to near that closing and you have done something, maybe you haven't done something, or you haven't communicated properly, where they think it's their perception. If they think you haven't done something, or if just the shoe drops at the end, they're going to turn around and look at you. And if you've worked so hard for so long to get to that point, and then you've got an unhappy client, that is really the worst feeling in the world. So do everything. Just do your job, watch your deadlines, communicate. It's the biggest complaint of people that buy and sell property is that we don't communicate enough.
Wow, that's awesome. That's some great information. So you wanted to communicate and you want to be experienced, take classes, listen to what she says. We're going to ask some questions later on down the time frame regarding specific questions about waterfront. So just bear with us. We're just trying to get this started. But this is great. Bruce, what's your biggest challenge working with a buyer?
Well, I think when we talk about waterfront, that unlike, I don't know about you, Judie, but I think a lot of your product are single family homes.
Mm-hmm.
And on Longbow Key, we probably 80% are condominiums. Mm-hmm. So still would be considered waterfront, but then we're doing a lot with, condominium approvals, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then as compared to, let's say, waterfront homes and this is where it becomes, I say dicey. 1978, that was the key year when FEMA came into play, just to segue into it, like roofs now. And we'll get into insurance of what's happening. I'm sure everybody's experiencing this. Oh my goodness, if you have a single family home with a roof over 15 years old, you maybe have the insurance now, but the new buyer may have an issue in getting it. So those are the type of things as far as knowledge. And I think that probably Judie's like I am. We're both probably heavy listing agents. So we don't have, probably not working with as many buyers. And I know the challenge now is because we are so little inventory. And I'm sure everybody wants something. We got, our files are like this thick of buyers and our sellers are about that. We'd like to switch them around. So I think the big thing is not disappointing, somebody, and then to try to be in touch with these buyers or potential buyers. And usually what we do, we put them on an automatic search. Do they want single family homes? They want condominiums. So that way you won't forget about that person, when all of a sudden this place comes up and you go, oh my God, I forgot about them. They're going to get that, automatically. But, buyers, and what's interesting where we are, I remember about 3 years ago, I had somebody that said actually needed a home. I go, you need a home? I mean, normally it's your second, third, and fourth home buyers. They don't need a place. And I can tell you, we've all spent years with people, year after year. And now they wish they had bought before if they didn't, so, it's just one of those, still trying to stay in touch. And as far as the personalities, all different ones, that we deal with. You'll be with a couple and going, I don't even know why they're married. They shouldn't be. So, and then others are very respectful, et cetera. But, you know, it's just, that's the fun part about the job. You know, I've never really looked at it. It's not a job. I mean, we're out there, you're having fun with people, you're working hard, staying in touch. So it's just a combination.
Wow, that is really some great. What about on the listing side? So what is the challenge that are you having right now dealing with? I know that in this current market, but also I want to, because there might be a little bit of a shift going on. I've heard a lot of agents tell me that they feel like there's a shift starting. So we will get back to this. This market can't last forever. I think everybody knows that. But what in this market, here's two questions. In this market, how do you attain a listing in the luxury market and on the waterfront, and in this market and in the normal market?
I think I think my business is the same no matter what the market. I think you do pretty much the same things. You just adjust to the market, but it's referrals, advertising, open houses. I built my business doing open houses. I give new agents always the advice to start where you live. Start a neighborhood that you grew up in, or start in a neighborhood that you know really well, so you can sound like an expert. And I live on Siesta Key, so I stuck a sign out in an open house. Then people didn't really let you do open houses in their listings. You really had to beg. You really had to know the agent well if they would allow you to sit in an open house for them. It was very different than now. But I just stuck signs out every day of the week and met my first buyers.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I know a lot of other agents that are very well, and that are started their business as doing open houses. It's so when you're in the middle of a listing, what do you say? I mean, how do you retrieve that listing when you're speaking with that seller and you know that they've got two other agents in? What do you say?
I never talk about other agents. You try to find a connection with them. They've called you for a reason. I've never made an outgoing call for a listing or for a buyer. I've always gotten calls through either referrals or referrals from other agents too. I built a lot of my business with referrals from other parts of the country with agents. But when you're there at the listing appointment, try to find a connection with you. Find out about your person before you're going to see them. Find out that, do your research on the house, even though you might have never been to the house before. All sellers want to know is what their house is worth. It doesn't matter what you're sitting there talking about the whole time. They are just sitting on the edge of their chair trying to figure out what you're going to tell them their house is worth. I set that right aside. I tell them at that appointment that since I've never been in their house, I do not have a number for them walking in. I do 2-part listing appointments. I go to visit them the first day, and then I go back a few days later after I finish my research. And I set that right aside, so they start to listen to what I'm saying rather than all they're thinking about is hearing what the house is worth. And I tell them, I always bring a printout of all the homes that would be similar enough to theirs, and we can talk about those homes. I do research on those homes if I don't know them already. My market area is pretty much Siesta Key as far as listings. I would say 95% of my listings are on Siesta Key. And I do the research. I take materials showing properties in their neighborhood that I have sold before. And then we talk. I find out what their motivation is. You have to find out what someone's motivation is, or you could be just spinning your wheels. It doesn't matter if you get a listing and it's overpriced. It's not going to do you any good, because you then put it out to the world, it expires, and then someone else gets the expired listing and they get to sell the house, because now they've kind of the market will wear down a seller eventually. So you need to make sure that you have your listing agreement long enough for that to work in a normal market. This market we just came through is not real. It was a very false market. It was great. exhausting, but it's not reality. But I think you just develop a rapport with people. This is a people business. They have to like you and trust you before they hire you. So if you could bring all the stats in the world, but if you don't connect, there are listing appointments I go out on, and I come out of the house and go, "Ooh, I don't want to work with those people. I hope they don't call me back."
So you're kind of like interviewing them just as they're
Oh, I'm
interviewing you.
them at the same time that they're interviewing me. Absolutely.
That's very, very interesting.
I'd love to be in that position. Yeah, so I want to figure, how do you figure out pricing now? Are you?
Oh, it's
finding
hard.
Are you finding that difficult? Yeah.
Oh, pricing is, well, it was hard on the way up. It's hard now that it's kind of slowed down or kind of stopped.
Do you see a shift? Do you two
Well,
see a
there's been a
shift?
total shift since Easter, but it also, we're in our off season too.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen. We're not going to go back to where we were in the first quarter of the year. I don't think we'll see that ever again. We knew this was coming, but we didn't know when. We were lucky to get through all of this heated market in our busy season. So we had kind of like a double gift. So we're in our summer season. I'm really busy still. I'm busy with buyers. I'm busy with listings. I don't know where, I think the stock market bouncing around is our biggest problem right now. Gas prices, I don't think bother the level of people that we're dealing with in the luxury market. It does affect, the lower price ranges for sure. The interest rates affect the lower price ranges for sure. The luxury market, there's so much cash still sitting around. The people were getting mortgages simply to leverage their money because the money was so cheap. So I don't know. I think we'll probably go back to pretty much a typical 6 month on the market.
Here shortly.
Properties. I think, a balanced market. I would welcome a balanced market.
I think a lot of people would welcome a balanced market. What are your challenges, or what do you feel like when you're on a listing? How do you attain that appointment?
Well, I think and I have Assistant Cynthia, who's not here, but she tells me everything to do. And what I didn't know, that we farm about 47 communities. So
Oh,
for
wow.
example,
Okay.
yeah, and so Cynthia kind of runs the ship, and then I've got Dottie Rutledge, who works with a few agents. She's kind of the marketing person. So we have there might be 1 month, every other month, 47 different communities, which would be like I say a farming letter or something that we try to send out, whether it be L'Ambiance, Berger, et cetera. So part of that is just that repetition, and you might be doing this for 7 or 8 years. All of a sudden, hey Bruce, I've been getting your stuff, and yeah, okay, who are you? And then so that kind of keeps you in front. And then I remember back in the day. Of course, when I started, you had the MLS book like that. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have any of these things. And running an ad was really important because the consumer had no idea what was for sale. Now in running an ad, I'm sure Judie does too. I'll do a full page in the Longboat Observer, the Longboat Key News, but it's just strictly branding. It's just it, and it makes your seller feel good. At that point. I always joke about it that I would, in a normal market, I'd have probably 25 listings. Right now I have 4. So my picture gets a lot bigger and bigger just to take up space.
Or you can say a lot more.
The pictures get bigger. So, and I think part of it, and what we also do, we have, I say, a booklet that we put together for each listing. It'll be bound. It'll have with Coldwell Bankers. There's a lot about Coldwell Banker, and we'll put about me, etc. And it'll be for Mrs. So and so, especially done. Boom, go in. So just trying to do something that can set ourselves apart, from the other agent. And then from there, it's really hoping, hey, I've been around for 40 some years, trying to pull on the longevity, and just literally knowing, and you could give me an apartment number on South Longboat Key and I'll tell you right where it is. And so just the product knowledge, and I think that is really, really important. And if somebody does call, I will definitely look them up, go to the MLA or the tax records and see where they are, when they bought it, just kind of have a little information before returning that call if they didn't get me directly. So, and a lot of my contacts, I love to play golf and tennis when I have the time. And just through the Longbow Key Club, you know, you're kind of out and about and people, you know, kind of know you. So it's just been kind of a culmination of just contacts and being there for so many years. Yeah.
How many do you say, or what's the percentage of your business now is referrals?
That's a good question. It would be a major part of it. Yeah, and it could be a referral from a referral. You know, it could be that you've, you know, said to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and then they talked to so and so. So I would say it's a big part of that. And in my opinion, you know, I've never really looked at the dollars or the sales. You don't ever want to disappoint someone. You know, it's always getting back to that person as quickly as you possibly can. And then, as Judie said, just when I say being confident, you got the product knowledge, you have the years in the business, and then, you know, hopefully kind of setting that hook, you know, I guess you might say, for that seller to use you. And then, you know, going to the pricing, I would be the first one to admit I'm trying to go, whoa. I mean, how do we price this thing now? You know, where the market's gone, and we've been used to it. You don't want to overprice something, right, have it sit there. But in some cases, these prices have gotten there, you know, so it's been difficult.
So to have successful listing in luxury, you need to know you have product knowledge. Mm-hmm. You're going to need to have listen to what they're saying and gain that trust in that relationship. Mm-hmm. Yep. Awesome. This is great stuff. So, is there a CRM that you guys use, or can you recommend anything that keeps your database going? Is there something that you guys love to use?
Well, there are so many out now. I have a CRM within my own website. I have a full-time IT person, so she built the website and built it with a CRM attached. So when people go to my website, they're automatically dropped in. Our company has a CRM. There are so many different things. I used Outlook for a long time as my CRM because it was easier. I've used Top Producer in the past, Agent 2000. There are a ton of them. It doesn't matter how good the technology is, it's how you use it.
It's exactly right.
If you're not inputting people in every day, it's funny, my broker said he stopped putting, when he'd be out and about and he would get the business cards, he'd open his drawer so his desk stayed cleaner and he put the cards in the drawer. But when he got busy, he forgot about the cards that were in the drawer. So he stopped putting them in the drawer to put them into the CRM. He now leaves them on the top of the desk. So if nothing else, just keep putting the people in. I mean, Bruce and I, we've built our businesses over the years. I have people call me 7 and 8 years later that I've been dripping on in one way or another, whether it's a mail piece or an email piece. It's communication. It's being in front of the person when they're ready. You never know when they're ready. Do you know what the reticular activator is? I used to be with Brian DeFini for a long time, and he used to teach about reticular activator. It's the part of your brain that when you're focused on something, that's all the brain sees. So if you bought a red car, all of a sudden, all you see are red cars. If you're pregnant, all you see are pregnant people. And it's the same thing with real estate. As soon as they're thinking about, they may have just called us, but they may have been thinking about it for months. And when they pull the trigger and make that phone call to us, lots of times people will say, well, I just want to talk. Sometimes I believe that they just want to talk, and that's not it. So I started taking a listing agreement with me at every appointment, because I have sat there, even after all these years. They say it happened to me recently. I happened to take it with me already typed out. But at the end of the 2 hours speaking with them, they just looked at each other and I said, so what's our next step? And they said, can we sign the listing? And I was totally caught off guard, but I happened to have it with me. And that was an over $7 million listing that I could have maybe not gotten if I didn't have the paperwork.
So you need to be prepared.
Be prepared. Yeah, the whole thing is be prepared. The old Girl Scout and Boy Scout thing, be overly prepared, even if you don't use it. Sometimes, I take the listing agreement with me and they don't sign that day. But after that experience, I've had 2 of those experiences in the last few years. And I just make sure I always have it with me now.
Very good stuff. So we're going to start specifically asking questions about the waterfront because this is what so when you're working with a waterfront, how can you help the ones that have a desire to be in the luxury real estate, but they're not, and how they want to get there? How can you give them any advice on how to get there when they're not there? I'll give that to either one. Bruce, be fine.
You want me to go with that? Okay. Well, and I don't know if you could even be like a certain community. So I think it's a matter of honing in. And I guess I go back to all of the marketing that we do, you know, to sending out either monthly or bi-monthly to all of the residents within that particular community. So which would be Waterfront. So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like spending money, you know, to try to get the return. And sometimes it's going out before it comes in. And then, you know, it's funny, I'm always, whether it be newspaper ads, there's, you know, being on Longboat Key, there's a Longboat Key News, a Longboat Observer. Okay. And if you look through there and you're going to see the top agents, you got Roger, you got the Ackermans, you got, you know, everybody that is doing their thing there. And does that help? Maybe in the long run, but it's a tough call, you know, when it comes to that. So I think it's just really kind of a combination of somehow getting, you know, your foothold in that area, and they're all, and look at all of us. I mean, there are, like right now in Longboat Key, there are 25 condominiums for sale on the south end. Normally there'd be 150 to 170. Single family homes, there are 10.
Wow.
Normally there would be 50 to 60 or 70, and I know CS is the same. So we're all after the same piece of the pie. It's you know, not an easy environment out there. We're all kind of scrambling for
especially in
same
this
thing.
market, right?
Yeah, I'll be thrilled when this calms down.
What about the normal market?
The normal being
As being,
something different?
yeah, as being like, how do they, you know, in the normal market, like, what advice can you give to us as agents that want to put our foot in the door, but just don't know where to start? What would you think would be a good idea for them to get their foot in the door?
Well, one,
In a normal market.
Well, if we go into a normal market, as you mentioned, open house. I mean,
Bingo.
That is
Bingo.
It's the least expensive.
Bingo.
Tirade is, I call her tirade.
Oh, Marade.
But that's I mean, that's the way you get in and meet people. And of course, in the last 2 years, you know, we haven't been able to, you need an open house. And by the time you do an open house, it's sold.
Pending.
Right.
You know, so it's out of there. But we have 2 or 3 agents who, when we do, like we have a couple now, like one in Country Club Shores, you can do an open house whenever you want to. Like in what's called Bay Isles, you can only do an open house Sunday 1 to 4, you know, which is typically the time you do it anyway. But there are agents who absolutely, they say, hey, let us know when you can do an open house. So that would be the one thing there. So with that, Judie.
Yeah, I would say you're a newer agent and don't have a budget. You have to have a budget to be in real estate. Let's face it, it is not an inexpensive business to be in. Or you could be a buyer's agent and not have to spend a lot of money, except right now with gas, $5 a gallon is kind of tough. But generally, agents start out as buyer's agents. I started out as buyer's agent because I didn't have a big bankroll to do this. And then what I have found over the years, once you have your buyers and you sold them a house, if you stay in touch with your buyers, they're going to call you in 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 years if you've communicated with them and you haven't let them meet another agent that lives in the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's how you start to build your listing business. The other way is the open houses, you meet someone that just happens to like you, but you still have to do your homework. The other thing is, like Bruce said, if you're in an office where there are other agents that will allow you to do their open houses, get to know those agents. That is a gift to be able to do an open house for another agent, because generally, like I said, when I started, No, the first time I was allowed to do someone's open house, they stuffed me way east, and there was like,
Oh.
there was nothing around. It was before, out on Clark
Myaca
Road
City?
and Honor Ray, before anything was built out there, no one came. So find an agent that, show an agent in your office an agent that's successful in your office, that you're trustworthy, and that, you know, that you're eager and you're motivated, and they'll start to help plan. If they can use that for their sellers. If that agent can't be in the open house, or they don't want to be in the open house, they can kind of add you to their team in a way, because you can team up on individual real estate projects. And that agent can come to rely on you to be their go-to, to say to the seller, hey, I think this might be a good weekend for an open house. Even though that agent can't do his own open house, they can introduce you as part of their team, kind of like an outward part of their team to do their open houses. And that would be a way to break into the luxury market without having luxury listings. That's what you meet people at the level of the home that you're in generally. Serious buyers, if they're coming to a $2 million home, you know, they're looking for $2 million homes or thereabouts. They may be looking for a $3 million, or they may be looking for a $1 million, but you're in that bracket where you're putting yourself out there and enables you to meet people at that level.
That's awesome. As you guys are in the listing agents, what do you appreciate coming from a newer agent that just got done doing your open house for you? What do you appreciate about them? I'm just trying to get them to say,
Okay, so
hey, Judie, I love this. I want to come, you know, and they do your open house, but what is it that they can do to have you invite them back?
Well, I'll tell you exactly, because I have people do my open houses all the time. Be early, put lots of signs out, put balloons out, even go knock on doors in the neighborhood before your open house, introduce yourself, invite neighbors to the open house, put signs out in advance if you're allowed to. And when you're there, be present. How many times have you walked into someone else's open house and the agent's there on their phone, or they're on their computer or at the kitchen table, and they don't even look up from their laptop? Be present, and then make notes, have people sign in, get email addresses. That's the important thing. See if you can get their, I've never had someone not give me their email address and their phone number. There's a way to engage people in conversation so that they fill out the paperwork, or if you have something on your iPad that they can fill out. And for me as the listing agent, what I want, well, first of all, you have to make sure everything's locked up, because that's happened before. Lights out, locked up, house is secure, and then get back to me that day with the feedback. Even if you have no feedback, had no one in, we think, you know, the few people that were in thought the house was great, one of them might be interested, the other two had agents with them. Feedback, because that's all a seller wants to know is feedback. And if we don't have any feedback for them, that makes us look really bad, that we allowed you to do the open house and you're supposed to be on our team, you know, because we brought you into the fold and we have no feedback. And then if the next day, and so I usually will cover that and go, okay, well, they were so busy, they're probably making follow-up phone calls. And then the next day we don't get feedback. I won't ask that agent again to do an open house for me.
Great. Thank you for that information. What do you think, Bruce? What would encourage you to invite someone back to do one of your luxury listing open houses?
Well, we don't do nearly as many open, with so many condominiums,
Yeah.
et cetera. So we don't.
Very true.
But what I would say is, to reiterate Judie, is the fact of the feedback. There's a guy, Michael Albano, great guy in the office. Wherever he does, when I get an email that afternoon or the next day, very detailed, you know, that we can then forward on to the seller. Yeah, like you said, that is so important. I don't want to text or whatever. So something that is detailed, so the seller will know that that's happened. So. Yeah.
And don't forget, we're not just building relationships with our clients. When you're new in real estate, you're building relationships with your peer agents. That's all I did. I was so active at the board. I was at RE/MAX. I didn't know that everyone at the time was experienced at RE/MAX. I came in as an experienced entrepreneur, but I didn't have any real estate experience. And I was rubbing elbows with the most experienced people in town. And because at that time, that's how RE/MAX was set up. So I was lucky enough to meet all those people, but you're really meeting who you're doing business with. So develop more relationships. Be social. I'm not as social as I would like to be because I'm so busy now, but be social and go out and support other agents at their open houses. And learn the inventory. It's free. We are in, my company, I had to supply all my own inventory in my last business. I used to have all the fabric and all the supplies on the shelf. I had to invest in those things. We get free inventory. We get the privilege of going in and out of people's homes with a lockbox key. It's unbelievable. That is a privilege to be in someone's home like that. So utilize that to build your inventory. You can go into, if you happen to get shocked, you do an open house in a luxury home, and all of a sudden you get called to come over and talk to somebody about selling their house, you sure better have been in and out of some of these houses to talk about, because they'll figure out quickly if you know the market or if you don't know the market. So the best thing you can do, in fact, when I first started, one of the challenges we used to do with a couple of the agents that were new, where we used to go visit, we used to make appointments at all different condo buildings, because, you know, starting out new, one condo building kind of looks like the next, especially when they're all built in the 70s. Right? So go make appointments. We don't have as many open houses before, because we used to have Thursday broker opens. It used to be easy to go in and out of condos and houses. But make preview appointments and do it with a few people, or call the agents and tell them that's what you're doing, that you would like to come out and see their house in person, because there are a few people that you might have as a good fit as buyers. But learn your inventory, learn what you're selling, because you can't sell it if you don't know. I mean, people will figure it out real quick if you don't know your market.
So know your market. That's really great information.
I think another thing along that line too, so here we get our real estate license. All right, go get them. And then you're out there like, okay. You know, so depending on the office and how much you have within there as far as education, et cetera. But if you can either team with someone, I mean, you know, whether you're both new in the business, or ideally, if you can mentor, you know, get with somebody who's already established, that really is a jump start right there, because then you're able to kind of watch what that person does. But at least to, you know, so it's just difficult. It's like having a game plan and knowing where you're going to go, because it can get very frustrating, as this market can frustrate a lot of people, you know, as we're all, you know, out there with very little inventory.
The other thing I would suggest, to piggyback on what you just said, is if you do have a lead for a listing, take an experienced agent with you and give them 50% of your listing, co-list with that person. 50% is better than none.
Yep.
And that is how you build a relationship with an experienced agent.
Good point.
That is really great information, guys. I am so excited about this. We're going to kind of change it a little bit now. We're going to still talk about the waterfront, but we're going to start talking about the actual challenges that you face when your properties are now under contract. What issues come up? So Mike, one of my questions is, have you had any problems with non-conforming areas on waterfront properties, and what are they, and how can you help us understand what not to do?
So I guess one would be, again, talking about 1978, you know, everything's it's all on the ground. Let's say talking about a single family home. So now you go past that and you're elevated. And then as an agent, as you're walking through, and of course, if you see a kitchen, a bathroom, electrical outlets that are lower than they should be, you have knowledge, and there needs to be a quote representation, and that owner may or may not know that. So that's part of the part of the process. And then just well, we kind of get into which is not really but the insurance cost now, you know, that is really kind of coming. My office is right next to a guy, Mike Myer, has MIC insurance, and we see each other a lot and talk about it. So those things with a single family home, you could have a house today where the owner's paying, let's say, $10,000 a year, and then all of a sudden they're going to sell their home, and now it could be $25,000 because the roof is over a certain age period. So how much of that as an agent do you then disclose, when you're, selling the property, representing the buyer or the seller? So there are just a number of things to be cognizant of. So
When I'm talking about non-conforming, I'm talking about like homes that are built on the water,
right.
that have, the non-conforming areas that are already built up. Have you had problems with the city coming in and say, what experiences have you had with that? Have they wanted them to take out stuff out of the bottom, or is it kind of like a way of life there, or how do you see in that
Well, there's
perspective?
legally non-conforming,
That's-
and there's illegally.
Right. So what's the illegally? Have you seen a
Illegally
lot of it?
is what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Illegally is if the house was built, it was an elevated home built above base elevation to be used, living space to be used above the elevation. And there are things like Bruce described, electrical outlets low, kitchens downstairs, bathrooms. Now, Sarasota County, for years, we almost lost our subsidy about a dozen years ago because so many permits were approved for bathrooms and lower levels in non-conforming space or kitchens. So electrical improvements. So it's really hard to tell unless the person that owns the house, the owner, unless they actually have the original plans that were stamped by FEMA, or if they have the original permits showing that the items downstairs were permitted, because I do come across, I do a lot of single family, I do a lot of non-conforming. There are homes that actually have permitted areas in non-conforming space. But if you don't have that, it's not usual to get those plans that have been red stamped by FEMA that it is legally non-conforming. So what I do is I just assume, unless they can provide that information, that everything on a lower level of an elevated home is illegally non-conforming. People use the terminology that it's not insurable. That's not correct, because you can insure anything. I've had people in illegally non-conforming areas have that space insured. So, and if most sellers will say, well, it was like that when I bought it, that doesn't take them off the hook. So to answer your question, Annette, yes, if the city or the county, if you were having work done, let's say you had a bathroom downstairs and you didn't know any better and you closed on this property, and you wanted to do some improvement. And let's say you wanted to have the windows changed, you were going to put hurricane impact glass in. If the city came to inspect the windows that were put in for the permitting, and they noticed that you had a bathroom downstairs, you could then be made to take the bathroom out. So there are all different scenarios of that. I've been in every situation. So I am, as soon as I walk into a house, the hair on my neck goes up just to have that conversation about what do these people know about their lower level based on how they're using it. And it used to be that you could put tile floors down, or it used to be that there were certain things you could do. Everything changes. Don't ever assume that what you knew last year about non-conforming space is what applies to this year. Same for the 50% rule. That changes. I give people an overview of what the 50% rule is all about, which has to do with pre-firm on-grade properties. Every day I get a call. I had a client call yesterday on a home, and he said, I really love that home. You think we can put a second story on it? It's like, well, not here, not on the island, because your FEMA, your structure value would not be, even if you got a reappraisal, the structure value would never support having a second story under FEMA 50%. So there is a lot to know from a buyer's side too. If you're representing a buyer,
That's exactly right.
make sure you get legal advice right away. don't be the one that quotes the information. Send them to the expert to quote it, because it's a way to get yourself into a lot of trouble.
What do you do, Judy? So you see an area downstairs that you feel like is non-conforming, and the seller maybe is not or they don't want to say. So do you do something on the seller disclosure?
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
What do you normally?
So in a situation, I have them all the time. One of the ones recently had a bathroom downstairs. Now it was interesting because the bathroom was raised a foot. You had to step up, but it was still in the non-conforming space. But I knew their entry, because the entry of the house was on the lower level. That's conforming to your ingress and egress is conforming. But everything else down there, because it's all open space, people turn them into, pool cabanas or family rooms or extra bedrooms. So I always have them put on the seller's disclosure that the lower level is non-conforming, and there have been upgrades made over the years by prior owners that they are unaware of, whether they're conforming, whether they were permitted or not. So, we just put it out there. And if a buyer, some buyers don't care. Some buyers really don't care. They love the extra space and they say, we don't care. Other buyers, I had a buyer cancel a contract after we were in actually, we were beyond the as-is period. It was fully disclosed that there was a bathroom downstairs, but I had my clients take out all the fixtures. We took out the toilet, we took out the vanity, but we disclosed that the rough-ins were there under the tile floors. And there was a washer and dryer that had been moved from the upstairs to downstairs, that the sellers were not sure whether that was permitted or not. So we put on the seller's disclosure, basically just what I had just said. And in addition, we disclosed that there were rough-ins downstairs, and that buyer actually gave up his $30,000 deposit because he wasn't comfortable closing on the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you put it out there, and I've had a house many years ago, and oh my God, this was a huge home on Longboat. The whole downstairs was non-conforming. I mean, it was beautiful. But so we were very, concerned about how many people who came into the house, because all of a sudden somebody's coming into the house and it just takes one person to then say, go right to the city, because on Longboat,
that's what happens.
There, all of a sudden you got people coming in, and so it is a dicey thing. You have to be honest, naturally about it, but it's it can be a little unique at times.
Is there a place that they can go to gain knowledge? So let's say they go to a house and they're like, oh, this is non-conforming. Do you go to the city to call them? What do you do to get your information? Or do you have the buyer, more importantly, have the buyer call and let them do their due diligence? But do you have them call the city? What do you?
Well, if it's in the city, you would
Or
call
the county
city to find out what's been permitted. You start with permits. The problem is if it's been done, if it was done 20 years ago, it's not going to show up in permits. So that's when you call the law office.
Right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
If you're already under contract, you call your buyer's closer.
Yeah.
And have them help you out.
Did you, great information. This is awesome. I'm so excited. Question about the 50% rule. Do you find that is going on a lot down in the Keys in the waterfront properties?
All the time.
Especially for older homes. I mean, of course, when it's a, say below, let's say if it's an A zone, you're supposed to be at 11 feet, anything below that. And then, we talk about the 50%. And of course now, people are not going to say typically an 1,800 square foot home, that's on a $2.5 million lot.
Right.
It's going to be scraped. So a lot of times we don't go through that as much
It's
now,
less, yeah.
with the values having increased a lot.
Okay.
And then if you try that, as Judy said, you've got the 50%, and then you've got this footprint that you wouldn't want anyway. So you just get rid of it all. So we don't have it as much as we used to, I would say.
We have it a lot on Siesta.
I was
We have a
thinking you
lot of
still have a
older
lot.
homes on the canals.
Right. So does everybody here know what the 50% rule is? Raise your hand if you don't know the 50% rule.
Okay, FEMA, how we buy flood insurance. FEMA sets rules that to prevent people from building and rebuilding older homes and improving older homes in flood-prone areas, they limit us to improvements of 50% of the value of the structure. So if you have a home, if you have a $2 million property on Siesta Key, if it was a 2,500 square foot home on a $2 million valued property, as far as sales value, real estate market value, the structure might be worth 500,000 of the 2 million. So that structure, where people have all these great ideas, they're going to add on, they're going to put a second story on, they're going to bump it out. That structure, you can have it reappraised. You might get, instead of just 500, you might get an extra 100,000 out of it with a private appraisal. But you've got a $600,000 structure that you can do 50% of that value of improvements, and that's everything. They used to not count certain things. They count everything out. So for 300, what can you do for $300,000 in today's market? If you did all impact glass windows, that's easily $100,000 in a property like that. So what else, kitchen cabinets, painting, if it needs a new roof. So you can see how the dollars don't quite work. What I did find out though recently from an architect, because I pass these houses all the time and I even stop in front of them sometimes and think, how the heck did they fly under the radar with this home? And I did find out that if a property has been improved and then it gets sold, the 50% rule starts over again.
Okay.
If a property is purchased in the name of one spouse,
Oh.
and gets transferred to the other spouse a few years later, the 50% rule starts over again.
That's
It's a little
interesting.
loophole I just found out about in the last couple of months for a client with an architect. And that's how they are kind of eking these along. But generally it is, it's tough. People have these big ideas on what they want to do. And if it was on the mainland, they could do it all day long. They just can't do it in the waterfront areas with 50% rule.
So you
Wow.
should just get married and divorced every 2 or 3 years. To
There you go.
There you go.
The state would love that with the dock stamps.
So just to really quick, so the way you find out if you have a 50% rule is you're going to need an elevation certificate whenever you're in a flood zone. And that elevation certificate is going to tell you what the required level is. If the level is under that required level, then you're in the 50%. If the level is higher, then you're good to go. So that's how you find out if that house is in a 50% rule. That's just a little nugget for you guys.
And also another tip, if you're in a flood area and you're working with a buyer or a seller, always ask if they have flood insurance currently, because flood insurance is the only insurance that you can assume. A buyer can assume a seller's flood policy.
Oh, that's good stuff.
If it's a lot of cash sales, a cash sale, the assumption protects them from the closing date because the policy is already in place. In a cash sale, if it's a new policy, there's a 30-day waiting period. In mortgages, there is no waiting period. So always ask if there is a flood policy to transfer. What happens is you pay per diem back to the seller because most flood policies are paid in advance. So if the seller has a policy that there's still 9 months left on it, the buyer will reimburse the seller for that at closing. But it is a way to get a less expensive insurance policy and immediate insurance, especially for your cash buyers.
Wow, that is really good stuff. Thank you so much. Stick that microphone up a little closer. She said she's never been told she can't hear her. Go ahead and say that again.
Okay, so for flood insurance, if you have a buyer or seller, always ask if there is current flood insurance, if the seller has a current flood insurance policy. If there's a current flood insurance policy, if it's an NFIP policy, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. If it's an NFIP policy, it can automatically be transferred to the new owner. And that's a savings and an immediate insurability with a cash buyer. So at this time of year, going into since we're already in hurricane season, that's a super important thing. If you're an off season, it's not such a big deal. But if you're, each house I've bought here has been in the middle of July. So flood insurance is a big deal at this time of year, especially. But that is the number one thing as insurance goes higher. Just to give you an example, I had buyers that were buying a property on Longboat, and
What are you doing in my neck? Doesn't seem wrong.
and the flood policy that was existing before they actually responded to us that they had one. So what I do is immediately call my insurance agent and get a quote. So when you're working with a buyer, get all this information up front, because I don't like surprises. So I requested the flood policy, and the agent was not very helpful. It wasn't Bruce. The agent was not helpful at all. So in the meantime, to get some information to my client, I had my insurance agent pull together a quote for flood insurance. We finally got that the owner did have flood insurance, which was only $900 a year. The quote came in for my client at $6,300 for the new policy. That's the kind of differential there is. So it is really, really important representing your client to find that out.
Wow, that is amazing information. You guys thank you so much. You guys are doing great.
Repeat that again.
The other question, and we're going to do one more question, and then after this, we're going to do a question. And so we're going to have the last few minutes of questions from you guys, even in the Zoom. So this is the last question I'm going to ask. It's kind of important. I know that on the Keys and in Waterfront, we do experience with mangroves. Have you had any issues with that? And docks as well. Like, I'm going to combine these together. If you had any issues with docks and also the mangroves, when people want to cut them down because they want to have a view, what in your experience can you share with that?
That's another.
You're better off to murder a person than cut down a mangrove.
That's right.
There are stronger penalties for
That's
that.
right. Financially, anyway, right?
Yeah, no, you don't even want to go there. Of course, then there's a red mangrove, there's a black mangrove. Yeah, you definitely don't even want. You want to get a specialist in.
Professional mangrove.
Yeah,
company.
to take a look and give you his or her opinion of whether you can trim them or not.
Yep.
There's only a certain time of the year, and then they can only go down a certain percentage. So
there's like strict limitations and strict guidelines with
You
mangroves.
would never want to get that phone call from
No.
the EPA.
No.
Your client would never want to get that phone call. There are professional mangrove trimming companies that you contact. Don't ever allow one of your clients to do that themselves. We know the horror stories.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
So you're saying if you see a home that they're showing property and there's mangroves on there,
And if they're
And-
really tall and your client says, well, I'm just going to trim those down so I can get a better view, call the mangrove company and find out what they can and can't do.
that should be part of your due diligence period, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
And also another thing, when you're doing, when you're selling on Waterfront, there are addenda that you should attach to your contract, or disclosure addenda that your client should get, your buyer should get. So make sure that you're disclosing. Just go on any of the, whatever companies that the company that you're with, whatever forms program you use, just type in Waterfront or flood and see what disclosures there are, because you want to over disclose everything when someone's buying a waterfront.
Wow, that is really great. You guys have been great. I'm just loving this so much. There's some really got great information. Okay, so we're gonna open this up. We got a, oh shoot, I'm sorry, dock. Do you guys want to hear about the docks, correct? Because that's huge.
Don't ever assume you can build more of a dock than already existing, or that you can build a dock in some place where there is none. Again, call in a seawall, dock and seawall company. Just professionals, lean into the professionals, lean into the law office for legal, lean into the inspectors. Don't ever give an opinion about inspecting a house. We could tell you lots of stories about that. There are lots of agents that have purchased things along the way, even because they gave an opinion. And lean into the dock companies and the dock seawall and the mangrove companies for waterfront. Just use the professionals. They're happy to help.
I don't know about CS, but on Longboat, I think it's pretty standard that you cannot exceed a third of the width of the canal. Let's say if I use Country Club Shores as an example. So with a tie-out piling, and then I believe it's like 500 and some square feet for your
Right.
dock space, let's say.
Right.
So if somebody says, hey, I'm going to make a dock this volume, no.
Right.
Let's say we got to figure out the square footage,
Right.
how far the tie-out piling can go. So
And it's an
that's
environmental thing also. And when you see those long skinny docks on bayfront properties, it's because that was the allowable square footage that they were allowed to have to get out to where it was deep enough for the boat.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to open up the last 15 minutes with questions. Does anybody have any? Oh,
Sure.
what was the question? So the question is there anything that they must disclose with waterfront condos? They can't hear. I have to
Yeah.
repeat the question. Sorry.
Of course, with the Miami incidents now, a couple of years ago, I mean, so many people are now questioning, has there been an engineering study done, et cetera, so it kind of lead in, let's say on Longboat, you've got some of these were built in, let's say 70, they're now 50 some years old. So I think as far as a condominium, in people's minds, it's about the structure. The other thing too is, and I'm just going through something right now where a special assessment just came up, from the time we went under contract, to closing, it was, so, getting all the information, from, about the association, and minutes are really important because you will find something out potentially that the seller may not know.
Right.
So for, that, hey, in 2 years, we're gonna be replacing the whole side of the building. Well, so at least you'd be aware of it. So I would guess it would just be more about the internal part of what's happening with the association.
Perfect. You had a question over here.
I do. What advice could you give us on doing comps on a waterfront property? One on the Gulf of Mexico versus on the coastal, one on the beach. Do you have some advice for us besides the properties that are right in that area? Are there anything else to take into consideration to pricing a waterfront property?
Just pick a number. What do you want here? I'll let you go ahead.
Apples to apples. Use beachfront, anything on the Gulf, use as comparable to anything on the Gulf. Anything on the bay, use as comparable to the bay. Canals to canals. I never mix them because they're all different. They're different prices. Canal front properties have a limit. Bayfront properties have a limit, and then Gulffront properties have their own thing. Never mix them in comps.
What about one that has 6 docks compared to one that has 1 dock going out? Does that make a difference in pricing?
I would have to take everything else that the properties had into consideration. Why could one have 6 docks, and why does one have 6 docks and one doesn't? The 6 docks may not be a benefit.
Yeah, and I think also, for example, I don't even know how to get to Siesta Key. I think there's a road that goes there. So I've never done a comparable, I've never done a comparable, let's say for a canal home on Longboat to Siesta. I really have no idea. So I would use just Longboat Key.
Exactly.
And then I'll just use Country Club Shores. So you've got the bayfront properties, and which would be, let's call that 3 million or who knows. But each one you go back, so it's also even that sliver view of the bay in that example, or a larger portion of water will really come into play, as far as the value. Then, how old is the house, is impact glass, the age of the roof, so then you just get into the normal things there. But I find, Jude, I've done this for a long time, and I'm just going, this is tough. Now a condominium, you can kind of get an idea.
It's
You
more
know.
of the interior.
Yeah,
And the
so-
and the view
In the view, and you got the stack over
and
here.
their amenities, right?
Exactly. So in the homes, it's just
Homes are
a
tough.
little bit more difficult. Yeah.
Do you find in a normal market, and obviously this market is not a normal market, but we're gonna probably get there. When you're trying to price houses, have you ever found that the seller would like to do an appraisal on their home or you split the cost? I've heard agents like would split the cost or, no?
No, we're professionals. We're not there to split the cost of an appraisal. That's the seller's responsibility.
But do you find that in a normal market that they do that if they feel like their home is unique and they want to?
I mean, I never discourage it. The one thing that I love having an appraisal for, whether it's new or old, is to find out the real square footage, because these properties, especially the older ones, over the years, they get added on to and bumped out, and the tax permit department doesn't talk to the property appraiser's office. So square footage is a big unknown in these older properties. So having an appraisal is great because you get a certified appraisal. You can use that number in MLS if it's more.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I respect both of you. You know who I am, but Judie, I met you in 2003. I still remember I met you at an open house on Siesta Key down the street from me when I was walking at the beach one day. And I was impressed with you back then,
Aw.
before I was even a realtor. So I love you both. Bruce amazes me because you do a lot of business too, and you show up for your showings, and I'm like, where's your assistant? It's you there. A lot of the times it's you, and I'm always.
When did I do that?
It was his
No.
double.
Yeah. No, I try to make sure. I do that as much as I can.
Because you do know the property. That's
Yeah.
why you're successful. You know your inventory, you know what you're selling too. So you're great. But two questions real quick. When in the process, when you meet someone with a higher net worth individual, whether they come to your open house or they're referred to you, get the proof of funds. If they say they're cash buyers, but they act like you don't know who I am, I'm not giving you that. I've had cultural people that don't want to do that for various reasons. And also, I just got a $4 million referral yesterday, and I thought I was all excited until I Googled him.
Oh,
And it's a bad situation, reputation, lawsuits, all kinds of stuff. And it's the sister that gave me this. So how do you say no when you don't want it? And where do you get, how soon in the process do you get the proof of funds in your relationship?
Can I answer the one about the Google?
Go for it. I never get proof of funds, but that's an easy answer.
My kids laugh because they heard me one time say to a guy that's giving me a hard time, I said to him, Google me. So when
That's
they're
good.
teasing me, my kids go, oh, Google me.
Mhm.
But that Google's your best friend.
Yeah.
And I have a saying that if I have a referral, a $4 million referral especially, and I find that maybe I don't like them, I just refer them to somebody that I don't like.
You guys get a referral.
that's a good one, Judy. That's great stuff.
And you don't get proof of funds?
No, I say, so jokingly, depending on the size of, or the amount of the property, like one of my largest sales ever, we had one on St. Armand's for over $10 million, and that we definitely got proof of funds. Or, and I shouldn't say it could even be 4 or 5, but I'm finding that's more and more now.
Yes.
That I have a listing on Longboat now. We just put it on the market, and the agent automatically sent proof of funds. And it was less than $1 million. So I think that
It's become.
it's a good idea, because you never know.
And make sure they look official, like don't send a screenshot from the guy's bank account. I mean, it's kind of.
Right.
Make it official from a financial institution, their CPA, or their bank account, a printout of the bank account with the account numbers redacted.
The other thing that you can do also is request from the buyer, having them go to their bank and just on their letterhead,
Right.
say, oh, I am such and such bank and they have such and such money in their
They all have
account.
those forms. each
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
financial
Yeah.
institutions.
Yep. Is there any questions in Zoom? I just want to give them a chance.
What addendum and disclosures should be included when buying a waterfront?
What addendum and disclosures are needed when buying a waterfront property?
There are flood insurance disclosures in the forms programs. There are, I believe there are inspection, you might want to use an inspection addendum in addition to like outlining what inspections they can get. Because if you're selling on the waterfront, you might want to have a seawall inspection, you might want to have a dock inspection.
Coastal construction line.
Coastal construction line, if you're on, you use the addendum if you're pretty sure that you're on the CCCL. But there are a couple of flood disclosures. One's for flood insurance and one is for buying in a flood zone. There are disclosures in them. They're not the ones you attach, but they're additional disclosures that are in the forms programs.
This would be for Judie. If
Yes.
I'm buying a single family home on KC and the property is on the bay and also owns property on beachfront, and you're showing me that property, could you explain to me how you're selling that property and explaining that that beach is kind of private but not private? How would you describe?
Well, they own, whether you agree with it or not, in Florida, the property owners own up to the mean water, or the public is allowed to walk up to the mean water line, mean high water line. And that's how I would explain it, that it's just like walking Siesta Public Beach now, how all the condos have their flags out. That the public has access in the state of Florida up to the mean high water line, and that people could be walking by, but from the mean high water line up, technically the property owner owns that property.
And how do you know if they can put structures on that side of the water as far as, you know, 'cause a lot of people want to store stuff. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not.
Well, if it's there, you know that it's probably, I hate to use the word grandfather, but it's probably grandfathered in. You probably couldn't replace it if it was destroyed. And that needs to be made clear. Likely you couldn't put a structure there if there was not one existing. And if it is a Gulf to Bay property, specifically on Casey, if you own the Bay side and there's nothing on the Gulf side, you would definitely have to be behind east of the CCCL line. So again, that's an attorney, that's contacting a land use attorney that specializes in waterfront property.
Great. You had a question.
Cardinal has a
Yeah.
couple of
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question. It actually taps into the question we were just talking about, water rights. You know, what are some elements of water rights that you recommend?
The riparian rights, that's a legal issue. They do list the riparian rights on the survey sometimes, not always. The old surveys they used to, but that is definitely a legal question.
There's a kind of an interesting, on North Longboat Key on the Gulf, at the Maggie, is it called Ohana? There's a house, I guess two homes that were built. And so many, many years ago, they put I guess a seawall, which I'm sure before then you could walk. Now the Gulf is coming up to it. So it's coming straight out and there's no way to go from one side to the other. And the people who bought it, they have no trespassing signs, you know, on each end. They even had I think it was a weird thing in the paper. They got like a dog.
They bought a mean dog.
They bought a mean dog for people that would go back and forth over there. So anyway, it just popped in my mind because that's one that there's, you can't get from one to the other
Right, the one
unless
on
you swim
Siesta
around.
Key was on Shell Road.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think I know that property, and particularly you even have people fishing off that wall all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I remember I showed it it was sold for like 18 million or something. I was in it one time and I just saw what was going on. I go, wow.
Not a good idea.
No, not a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
idea.
That's what I
Yeah.
usually tell people, the
Yeah.
Shell Road property, I was like, no, not a good
Yeah.
idea.
When you were talking about the flood insurance can get assumed, do you find that, or do you ever hear that, like, when the renewal policy for the flood it escalates.
It
crazy.
will, it will.
Yeah.
They're
So it's
telling
just
us
to
about, it's to get it at a lower level.
For
So
just
when
a
it
few
does
months.
escalate, it's going to escalate at a lower level than if you start it. You'll start here and it'll eventually get here,
Okay,
but
so-
it won't start here.
I have a question. Do either of you perhaps have an open house that you're looking for someone to show?
You'll have to talk to my other team realtors first.
Do you get there early? Do you send feedback? Knock on doors for all the
You had a question?
Yeah, quick question, Julie. You mentioned the loophole of 50% rule. Do you think that works for trusts as well?
That's a legal question.
That is a legal question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer.
Call Steve.
All right.
There you
Will
go.
do.
Are you seeing a lot of interest from international buyers in the waterfront properties? Or is it mostly like within the community, Chesapeake?
Mostly domestic, still.
I think COVID really hurt that quite a bit. We
Yeah.
almost had more people sell, you know,
Oh,
because
yeah,
of
they're still
COVID.
selling.
Yeah,
farm.
yeah, but very rare. There was a great article somewhere that gave the top 10 states in the United States where people are coming from.
Yes.
And there's nothing about foreign buyers,
Right.
unfortunately.
What about red tide? How is that?
Good question.
Makes you gag.
Well, you know, it's all according whether we are having a bout of red tide or not. If people are, unfortunately, if it's your first time here, and it's a bad bout of red tide, you probably won't come back. So it's like all the little, I've always equated that to the people that are just coming for the first time. They're kind of like the little fish, right? They haven't, that we don't get to grow them into the big fish that'll buy a house. So if they come during red tide, we can explain that it's naturally occurring. I mean, we haven't, I'm not even gonna say it. So if they experience it, they may not come back. I have a sister who had been coming to Siesta Key before I even had ever heard of Siesta Key. And she moved, after she retired, she moved down with me to see if she wanted to live here full time. And we had a really bad time with red tide. And she was one of those that became severely allergic and she had to move back home. So.
And I think this is a segue just quickly on that. I remember this years ago. I had an apartment for sale at Beach Place. This was a Gulf front in the red tide. The fish are out there and you don't even want to open the window. So I go, this is going nowhere. So we go upstairs and with this couple, I think it was with another agent. And to your point, this lady had grown up here. She was used to red tide. They bought the condominium. I go, well,
Smart
there you go.
people.
Yeah.
Well, there
So
you
they-
go.
She was used to it. She wasn't
Yeah.
afraid. Yeah.
So I guess you have to just be comfortable with it. I can't imagine anyone experiencing it in one of the bad times, being comfortable with it, but there are differences, like on Siesta Key, I live on the Grand Canal. I've never seen any fish or anything back at my house. The water gets a little bit darker, but I haven't experienced what other people have experienced.
I have a mangrove question, because I'm showing a luxury property tomorrow. Mangroves are involved. Do you have anybody recommend before, because I'm about to write a contract on this waterfront property, and the very well-known and very successful agents that have it listed have said, oh, you can build a dock, here's a sketch on the survey for the dock, but it's all mangrove as far as I know. And my client is very important that they have a dock. So what would you do?
And there's no existing dock?
No.
Call the dock company. Is there a dock company that you use?
You were talking about a mangrove trimming company.
Well, that's different. If they want to build a dock, you have to find out if a dock can go there first before worrying about the mangrove.
That I'm okay on, it's the mangroves I'm concerned about too.
But the dock company will be able to tell you how much they're able to open up. The mangroves go straight across. The dock company will be able to help you find out what they call it a tunnel, and that how wide, because that would be your access point. And then as far as trimming the that's two different things. Trimming the mangroves is simply trimming.
Yeah.
The dock company may have a suggestion too, having been through that
Yeah.
before, and definitely have make sure you have a contingency, for, that dock or whatever to put one in. So you're covered.
We're gonna do one more question.
Thank you. I have a three-part short question. So the first one is, if you have a listing that's, say, 2 to 3 million, what type of a budget would you set for that?
You talking about marketing budget?
Yeah, marketing budget, sorry.
Well, I've always been told these, of what you earn, you spend 15% in marketing.
Got it. And other than the Luxury Marketing Institute, what other courses have you taken that were kind of cool that you would recommend?
Well, I'm with Sotheby, so we do a lot of in-house in company marketing for luxury. So I would say just keep looking for the luxury guild, or if it's through the board, if you don't have access through your company, keep looking for the offerings through the board.
Well, the luxury marketing was good. It's just, it's something that some of us have probably already done. So I was just wondering if anything else that you have done.
And everything I do now is through my company.
You mean, is that as far as like brochures, when you say
No,
marketing?
I'm talking about a course that you would
Oh,
take
course,
that
okay.
you really liked and it was life-changing and it helped you with your knowledge.
I took one 42 years ago.
Okay.
Bruce.
And barely passed.
And my third question is, when you've been doing this for a while, was there something specific that you did that just shifted your business and made it fly? Is there some one or two things that you did that just went, wow, that just changed my whole business?
Being with the right company.
Two,
Pardon me?
number two.
Bruce?
Anybody other than Sotheby's is good. No, I think it's just, and I do totally agree that a company can be very important.
What about processes? Is there anything in your processes, because you've been doing this for a while, that you did and shifted and you went, wow, this just, I should have done this a long time ago?
No, it just, I go back many, many years ago before phones and whatever, and I'd come back in a day and there'd be these little pink slips of paper like that stacked up. And there's a lady, Stacy Belliquin. Now, Stacy is with Keller Williams now. And she said, you need help. And I go, and so there's that fine line in spending the money, to then get an assistant. And then what happens in that transitions. And then, so I think it's just a long-term process, and by quote, doing the right thing, technology. I don't even know how to turn on the phone or anything, but to have, let's say, for example, Cynthia, who's my assistant, has everything. It's a well-oiled machine, with Dottie, and we have a girl who does closings, Jennifer. So that takes the heat off of us. So I pay her for each closing that happens. So as Judie was saying, it's very important to be in touch. So nothing that I can say that just like overnight did it.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet.
Just a process.
Well, I know you hired your IT person because you just showed up everywhere too. Is it possible that the IT person was a big shift for you?
No, because I also, at the same time, it was during COVID and I lost my assistant because she wouldn't come in person anymore. So I had to find another place on my team for her. So I made her my marketing person. So she's full-time marketing now.
That's great. Well, I think our time is up. I just want to take a couple of minutes. Yes, just a sec. I wanted just to say thank you so much for coming. You guys, I know you, like I said, you guys are busy and we love giving back to realtors. So thank you guys for doing that. We really appreciate it. And visit the table back there with the sponsor. She's got a lot of goodies for you.
Oh,
Thank you guys for coming.
thank you. It was fun. Thank you.
I want to take you guys out for lunch at some point. Can I take you out to lunch?
Sure, I go where realtors always have free food.
Well, I always